I was 12 when the world I knew began to unravel, though it happened so quietly no one else noticed. The memory is sharp, like a needle-piercing thread through fabric. A Sunday in March 1947, the air heavy with the scent of stewing chicken and the laughter of my family spilling from our small Ohio farmhouse. I can still see the white embroidered tablecloth, my grandmother's wedding gift to Mama, spread across the table, its delicate stitches a symbol of dignity. That day, it felt like a shroud. My name is Martha, and at 78, my hands tremble as I embroider napkins for my great-grandchildren, but my mind holds fast to those early years in rural Ohio, where cornfields stretched like an ocean and life was as predictable as the church bell on Sunday mornings. Some memories don't fade, they grow heavier, like stones in a pocket, carried through a lifetime. Our town, nestled in the rolling hills of Greene County, was a place where time moved slowly. The year was 1947, and we lived by the rhythm of the seasons, planting in spring, harvesting in fall, and enduring the bitter winters that turned the dirt roads to mud. Our house, a weathered clapboard structure with a tin roof, stood at the edge of a cornfield, its whitewashed walls gleaming twice a year, before Easter and Christmas. Mama kept the dirt floor swept clean, and the smell of lye soap clung to everything, a testament to her pride. We were 7 siblings, I the third, caught between the older ones who worked the fields with Papa and the younger ones who still clung to Mama's skirts. Life was hard but honest. Papa's hands, rough from years in the fields, could coax gold from the earth, and Mama's never stopped moving, cooking, sewing, tending the garden, or wringing the necks of chickens for Sunday lunch. Sundays were sacred, the one day Papa didn't rise before dawn to work. We'd wake to the smell of cornbread baking, pull on our best clothes, my blue cotton dress, the only one not patched for chores, and walk to the little white church in town. The preacher's voice would boom, and I'd sit straight, my braid tight from Mama's hands, feeling the weight of her expectations. "Help your sisters with their braids, Martha," she'd say, and I'd obey, craving her rare smile. After service, we'd return home, the house filling with the chaos of aunts, uncles, and cousins. The men talked harvests and politics, the women swapped recipes, and we children ran wild in the yard, our laughter mingling with the clink of dishes and the sizzle of onions in Mama's skillet. Sunday lunch was a ritual, the table groaning under platters of chicken, beans, and cornbread, the air thick with the promise of rest. That March Sunday, my Uncle August arrived, as he often did since moving to town after his wife's death. He was my father's older brother, a man in his mid-40s with a smooth voice and hands unscarred by fieldwork. He owned a store downtown, a fact that made him seem worldly in our small community. Educated, Papa called him, because he'd finished 3rd grade, a rarity among us. August brought gifts, candy for us children, a bolt of fabric for Mama, and his arrival was met with smiles. To me, he was a figure of awe, his stories of cities like Chicago painting pictures in my mind. That day, he called me over, his voice warm. "Little Martha, come see what your uncle brought you." He held a book, its pages filled with images of skyscrapers, places I'd never dreamed of. I followed him into the guest room, my heart light with the thrill of a gift. The room was dim, the curtains drawn against the afternoon sun. "Sit here," he said, patting the bed, and I did, obedient as always. The book lay open, but his hand moved to my back, then lower, and a cold shiver ran through me. His breath, sharp with whiskey and coffee, brushed my ear. "You're turning into a pretty young lady, Martha," he murmured. What followed is a wound I've carried for decades, its edges still raw. His hands, his weight, the silence he demanded afterward, our little secret, he called it, his voice a blade. He spoke of shame, of ruining the family, of Papa's job at the co-op he'd secured. "No one will believe you," he said, adjusting his clothes. "I'm a respected man, and you're just a girl." I left that room changed, my blue dress crumpled, my braid unraveling. The tablecloth, once a symbol of pride, seemed stained, though no one else saw it. That night, I cried into my pillow, muffling sobs so my sisters wouldn't hear. I prayed to the Virgin Mary, but the Sundays kept coming, each one a nightmare dressed in the guise of family. August's visits became a ritual of terror, hidden behind the clatter of lunch and the adults' naps. I learned to survive, inventing excuses, stomachaches, chores, games in the yard, to avoid being alone. But when those failed, the guest room waited, its shadow swallowing my voice. Now, at 78, I see that girl with clearer eyes. She was brave, though she didn't know it, carrying a secret too heavy for her small frame. The cornfields, once a golden sea, became a place to hide, their rustling stalks a whispered comfort. The town, with its gossip and its church, was both refuge and cage, its people blind to the pain beneath my silence. But even then, a spark of resilience flickered within me, a stubborn will to endure. I didn't know it would lead me to a life of purpose, to a home filled with girls like me, their stories echoing mine. That Sunday in 1947 broke something in me, but it also set me on a path to mend not just myself, but others. The tablecloth, folded away for years, would one day grace a new table, one where hope, not horror, was served. The cornfields whispered secrets as I ran through them, their golden stalks brushing my arms like 1,000 soft hands. It was 1948, and I was 13, a year into the nightmare that Sundays had become. The Ohio sun hung low, painting the hills in shades of amber, but its warmth couldn't reach the cold knot in my chest. Our farmhouse stood at the edge of the field, its whitewashed walls a lie of purity, hiding what happened in the guest room when the adults napped. I was Martha, the girl who swept the yard, braided her sister's hair, and carried a secret heavier than the buckets of well water I hauled each morning. At 78, I can still feel the weight of those days, the way they bent my spine, though now I know they also forged my strength. Life in our small town moved like the slow churn of the Scioto River, its rhythms dictated by church, harvest, and gossip. The air smelled of earth and wood smoke, and the cicadas' hum was a constant hymn. Our house, cramped but clean, was Mama's pride, its dirt floor swept daily, the tin roof rattling in summer storms. Papa worked the fields, his hands cracked like dry riverbeds, while Mama's never rested, kneading dough, mending clothes, or scolding us 7 siblings to keep us in line. I was the third, dutiful but quiet now, my chatter replaced by a stillness no one questioned. "She's growing up," Papa said, mistaking my silence for maturity. Only the cornfields knew the truth, their rustling leaves my only confidants. Sundays remained the heart of our week, a day of rest that mocked me. The routine was unchanging, church at 8, my blue dress starched stiff, Mama's braid pulling my scalp. The preacher's words about sin stung like salt in a wound, and I'd stare at the stained glass window, its colors blurring through tears I wouldn't let fall. Back home, the house filled with kin, uncles, aunts, cousins, the table groaning under Mama's cooking. The embroidered tablecloth, once my pride, now felt like a funeral veil. Uncle August's arrival was met with smiles, his store-bought gifts, peppermints, a bar of lavender soap, making him the family's hero. To me, he was a shadow, his smooth voice a trap. "Little Martha, help your uncle with the bags," he'd say, and I'd obey, my stomach twisting. That year, I became a master of evasion. I'd volunteer for every chore after lunch, washing dishes, sorting beans, sweeping the porch, knowing the adults' nap time was when August struck. "Let me do it, Mama," I'd say, my voice bright with false cheer, hands raw from scrubbing plates. Other times, I'd feign illness, clutching my belly. "Too much cornbread," I'd mumble, retreating to the yard where I'd organize noisy games with my siblings, their laughter a shield. When that failed, I'd slip away, hiding in the barn among the corn sacks or climbing the gnarled apple tree behind the house, its branches cradling me as I watched the sky. From there, I could see the guest room window, its curtains drawn like a closed eye, and I'd wait, heart pounding, until August left. But evasion wasn't always enough. Some Sundays, he'd find me, his voice soft but commanding. "Martha, come see this magazine from town," he'd say, and I'd follow, knowing resistance would only make it worse. The guest room smelled of dust and whiskey, and his hands moved with a practiced ease that made my skin crawl. "Our secret," he'd whisper afterward, his threat unchanged, "Papa's job, Mama's shame, the family's ruin." I'd nod, my throat tight, and return to the kitchen, where Mama hummed hymns, oblivious. The tablecloth stitches mocked me, each one a silent scream I couldn't voice. At night, I'd pray, my whispers lost in the snores of my sisters sharing our bed. Please, Mary, make him stop. But the Virgin was silent, and the Sundays kept coming. School was my only escape, a half-hour walk to a one-room building where Mrs. Johnson taught us to read and cipher. I'd once loved it, my hand shooting up to answer questions, but now I sat in the back, my mind clouded. Martha, you're slipping, Mrs. Johnson said, her brow furrowed. I wanted to tell her, to spill the poison eating me, but August's words choked me, no one will believe you. So I lied. I'm tired, ma'am, I said, and she sighed, sending me home with extra sums. At home, Mama noticed my change. You're too quiet, honey, she said, her hands kneading dough. I opened my mouth, but fear sealed it shut. Just growing up, I mumbled, and she nodded, too busy to press. The worst was the loneliness. My siblings, caught in their own worlds, didn't see my withdrawal. My younger sister, Ellie, would tug my braid, begging me to play, but I'd snap, leave me be, and she'd run off, hurt. I hated myself for it, but the secret was a wall between us. The town, with its nosy neighbors and church ladies, offered no refuge. They'd cluck over my thin frame, saying, she's growing too fast, but never asked why my eyes were hollow. Only the cornfields listened, their stalks bending in the wind as I whispered my shame to them, my tears soaking the earth. Yet, even in that darkness, a spark of defiance grew. I began to notice things, August's glances at other girls, the way he lingered near my cousin Lily at church. It made my blood boil. If I couldn't save myself, maybe I could save them. I started watching him, learning his patterns, positioning myself between him and the others. Lily, help me fetch water, I'd say, pulling her away. It was a small rebellion, but it gave me purpose, a reason to keep going. At 78, I see that girl now, her courage hidden beneath fear, fighting a war no one else saw. The cornfields, the apple tree, the noisy games, they were her weapons, crude but effective. She didn't know it, but she was forging a path to something greater, a life where silence would be broken, and Sundays would mean hope. The summer of 1961 draped our Ohio town in a haze of heat, the air thick with the scent of sun-baked corn and the drone of cicadas. I was 16, no longer the wide-eyed girl who trusted the world, but a young woman with secrets carved into my bones. The farmhouse, its whitewashed walls peeling under the relentless sun, stood as a silent witness to my silent war. Sundays, once a day of joy, were now a battlefield, each one a test of my cunning against Uncle August's predation. At 78, I sit with my embroidery, my hands tracing patterns as my mind traces those years, the weight of them softened by time but never gone. Back then, I didn't know I was building resilience, only that I had to survive, not just for me, but for someone new who entered my life that spring. Our town clung to its rhythms, church bells, harvest cycles, and the gossip that swirled like dust on the dirt roads. The Scioto River glinted in the distance, its sluggish flow a mirror to our lives, steady but unyielding. Mama's garden bloomed with tomatoes and beans, her hands coaxing life from the earth while Papa's wrestled corn from the fields. Our house, cramped with 7 siblings, hummed with noise, Ellie's giggles, my brother Tom's arguments over chores, but I moved through it like a ghost, my laughter long buried. Mama noticed my thinness, my silences. You're not eating enough, Martha, she'd say, pressing a slice of cornbread into my hand. I'd force a smile, the food turning to ash in my mouth, August's threats echoing, you'll destroy the family. Sundays were a gauntlet. The church service, with its hymns and sermons on forgiveness, felt like a mockery. I'd sit in my faded blue dress, my braid looser now as I did it myself, avoiding Mama's hands. The embroidered tablecloth at home, spread for lunch, was a cruel reminder of what hid beneath our family's warmth. August's visits were a ritual, his store-bought candies and charming stories winning smiles from everyone but me. I'd perfected my defenses, volunteering for kitchen duties, hiding in the barn, or climbing the apple tree, its bark rough against my palms. But some Sundays, he'd corner me, his voice smooth as oil. Martha, help your uncle with something, he'd say, and the guest room's shadows would swallow me again. His whiskey-scented breath, his weight, his whispered threats, they were my private hell, endured in silence because I believed no one would listen. That spring, a new presence shifted the air in our house. My cousin Selena, 10 years old, arrived to live with us after her mother, Mama's sister, died of tuberculosis. Selena was a wisp of a girl, her curly hair a halo of brown, her freckled nose wrinkling when she laughed. Her grief was quiet, but her warmth drew us close. She slept in the bed I shared with my sisters, her small body curled against mine, and at night, under the flicker of the oil lamp, we'd whisper secrets, hers about missing her mama, mine about anything but the truth. Selena was a light in my darkness, but she also brought a new fear. I saw August's eyes linger on her during Sunday lunches, his hand resting too long on her shoulder as he offered her candy. "Little flower," he called her, and my stomach churned. I knew that look, that tone. It was the prelude to my own torment. I couldn't let it happen to her. The thought of Selena enduring what I had was a fire in my chest, burning away my fear. I became her shadow, inventing tasks to keep her near. "Selena, help me shell peas," I'd say, pulling her to the porch where Mama could see us. In the yard, I'd organize games, keeping her among the younger children, their noise a barrier August wouldn't cross. When he called her to see something special, I'd interrupt, my voice sharp. "Selena, Mama needs you in the kitchen." He'd frown, his eyes narrowing, but I'd hold his gaze, my heart pounding. It was a dangerous game, and I paid for it. When my strategies failed, August's anger turned on me, his hands rougher, his threats sharper. "You're causing trouble, Martha," he'd hiss. "Troublemakers end up alone." One Sunday in June, the air sticky with humidity, I saw him lead Selena toward the hallway, a magazine in his hand. "Come see this, little flower," he said, his smile a mask. Panic seized me, a cold sweat breaking across my skin. "Selena!" I shouted, crossing the room before she reached the guest room door. "Mama's calling you to help with dessert." She hesitated, confused, but I grabbed her hand, pulling her to the kitchen. August's face darkened. "Your mother didn't call anyone, Martha," he said, his voice low. "Stop making up stories." I ignored him, my pulse racing, and dragged Selena to Mama, who was stirring coffee. "Mama, can I teach Selena your pumpkin pie recipe?" I asked, breathless. Mama smiled, oblivious to my desperation. "Of course, honey. Get the pumpkin from the pantry." We spent the afternoon grating pumpkin, my eyes darting to the door, watching for August. When he appeared for coffee, his gaze met mine, a silent promise of retribution. That night, under the blanket, I made a vow. I couldn't speak my truth, but I could act. Every Sunday would be a battle to protect Selena, even if it meant more pain for me. I taught her to climb the apple tree, our secret refuge, where we'd whisper stories of far-off places. I gave her chores that kept her busy, away from August's reach. The cost was high, my nightmares worsened, my body thinner, my schoolwork a mess, but Selena's laughter, untouched by his shadow, was worth it. At 78, I see that girl, 16 and fierce, fighting with the only weapons she had, vigilance, deception, and love. The cornfields, the apple tree, the noisy kitchen, they were her fortress, built to shield another from harm. She didn't know she was laying the foundation for a life of protecting others, that her silent war would one day break the silence for many. The farmhouse, with its creaking floors and hidden horrors, was also where I learned to resist, where I found a purpose that would carry me through the darkest years to come. The spring of 1964 bloomed with a deceptive softness, the Ohio hills cloaked in green, the air sweet with apple blossoms. I was 17, a girl stretched thin by years of carrying a secret that gnawed at my soul. Our farmhouse, its tin roof glinting under the March sun, stood as both home and prison, its whitewashed walls hiding the horrors of Sunday afternoons. The cornfields swayed in the breeze, their whispers my only solace, but even they couldn't drown out the dread that gripped me each week. At 78, my hands, now slow with age, still recall the tremble of those days, the way they clenched into fists, ready to fight for the one I'd sworn to protect. That spring, the weight of my silent war became too heavy, and everything changed. Our town was a patchwork of farms and gossip, its pulse set by the church bell and the hum of tractors. The Scioto River wound lazily through the valley, its banks a playground for children who didn't carry my burdens. Mama's garden thrived, her hands coaxing beans and squash from the earth, while Papa's wrestled corn, his face lined with years of labor. Our house buzzed with my 6 siblings, their voices a constant din, but I moved through it like a shadow, my smiles rare and forced. Mama worried, her eyes searching mine. "You're too pale, Martha," she'd say, pressing a hand to my forehead. I'd shrug, blaming school or chores, afraid to let the truth spill. August's threats, Papa's job, Mama's shame, the family's ruin, were chains I couldn't break. Sundays were a torment, each one a chess game I played against August. Church was a blur of hymns and guilt, my faded blue dress a reminder of the girl I'd lost. The embroidered tablecloth, spread for lunch, mocked me with its pristine stitches, a facade of family harmony. August's arrival brought cheers, his gifts, candies, a tin of coffee, cementing his place as the generous uncle. But I saw the predator in his smile, especially when it turned to Selena, my cousin, now 13 and radiant in a floral dress Mama had sewn for her birthday. For nearly 3 years, I'd shielded her, inventing tasks, pulling her into noisy games, or hiding with her in the apple tree. My vigilance had kept her safe, but it came at a cost. August's anger grew, his hands harsher when he caught me alone, his threats sharper. "You're making things difficult, Martha," he'd hiss, his breath sour with whiskey. "Keep it up, and you'll regret it." That Sunday, March 15, 1964, Selena's birthday, the air was thick with the scent of cornbread and strawberry jam, a rare treat Mama had made. The radio crackled with news of civil rights protests in Washington, a world away from our rural life. Papa and August debated politics in the living room, their voices a low rumble, while we girls helped Mama in the kitchen. Selena glowed, her curls bouncing as she laughed, unaware of the danger I saw in August's eyes. He arrived with a small package, his voice syrupy. "Selena, I've got a special gift for you, little flower." My heart froze. I knew that tone, that look, a prelude to violation. For years, I'd outmaneuvered him, but today, his determination was palpable. Selena's birthday the perfect excuse to isolate her. Lunch unfolded as always, the table crowded with kin, the tablecloth a silent witness. I barely ate, my eyes on Selena, who sat across from August, her smile innocent. When the meal ended, the adults drifted to their naps, and I braced myself. August called to Selena, his voice casual. "Let's go to the guest room where it's cooler to open your gift." My pulse roared in my ears, a dam of fear and rage cracking inside me. I couldn't let her go. Without thinking, I crossed the room, my legs trembling but my voice steady. "Selena's not going anywhere alone with you," I said, loud enough for the room to still. Papa, dozing in the rocking chair, snapped awake. Mama froze, plates in hand. My siblings gaped, the air thick with shock. August's face twisted, his smile forced. "What's that, girl?" "I'm just giving Selena her present." I stood my ground, tears burning my eyes. "Not ever again," I said, my voice shaking but firm. Papa stood, his face red. "Martha, apologize to your uncle," he barked, embarrassment in his eyes. The dam broke. Tears spilled down my cheeks, and the words I'd choked on for 5 years clawed their way out. "I won't apologize. He does things to me," I sobbed. "Things an uncle shouldn't do. Since I was 12, every Sunday when you all rest." The room was a tomb, the silence suffocating. August laughed, a hollow sound. "She's making it up, full of fantasies. Probably jealous of Selena's attention." Papa wavered, his eyes darting between us, doubt clouding his face. August was his brother, his hero, the man who'd secured his job. How could he believe me? But Mama, standing at the kitchen door, let the plates crash to the floor, the sound like thunder. "Is it true, Martha?" she asked, her voice low, not accusing but pleading. I nodded, unable to speak, tears choking me. She crossed to me, her rough hands cupping my face with a tenderness that broke me further. "How long, honey?" "Since 12, I whispered. Every Sunday. Horror dawned in her eyes, then fury. She turned to August. "Shut up," she said, cutting off his protests. "Get out of my house." August's mask slipped, his voice venomous. "You'll regret this, Martha. No one will believe you. I'm somebody, and you're nothing." Papa, trembling, advanced, grabbing August's shirt. "If you touch my daughter again, I'll kill you," he growled, shoving him toward the door. August left, slamming it behind him, and the house erupted. Papa sank into a chair, sobbing. Mama held me, her embrace a lifeline. "Why didn't you tell us?" she whispered. "He said no one would believe me," I said, the weight of years lifting, though the pain remained. Selena, quiet until now, stepped forward. "She protected me," she said softly. "Every Sunday, Martha kept me away from him. Now I know why. At 78, I see that moment as the hinge of my life." The girl who spoke, trembling but unyielding, broke the silence that had caged her. The cornfields, the apple tree, the tablecloth, they bore witness to her courage, a spark that would grow into a flame. The farmhouse, once a place of terror, became a battleground where I claimed my voice, not just for me, but for Selena, and later, for countless others. The scars remained, but that Sunday, I began to heal, stitching a new pattern over the wounds. The days after that March Sunday in 1964 were a storm of their own, the Ohio sky heavy with clouds that mirrored the turmoil in our farmhouse. I was 17, a girl who'd shattered the silence that bound her, but the cost was a raw, aching vulnerability. The cornfields, once my refuge, stood silent, their golden stalks swaying in the wind as if mourning the family we'd been. The whitewashed walls of our home, scrubbed clean by Mama's hands, couldn't hide the cracks in our foundation. At 78, I thread my needle with care, each stitch a reminder of how I began to mend myself in those broken days, finding purpose in the ruins of my childhood. Our town buzzed with whispers, the gossip as relentless as the cicadas' hum. The Scioto River flowed on, indifferent to our pain, its banks muddy from spring rains. Inside our house, the air was thick with grief and guilt. Papa, once a pillar of quiet strength, was a shadow of himself, his eyes red from tears he shed alone on the porch. "Forgive me, Martha," he'd whisper when I found him there, his voice breaking. I should have seen. Mama became my fortress, her hands, rough from years of work, now gentle as they brushed my hair. "We'll get through this, honey," she said, though her own eyes betrayed sleepless nights. My siblings, confused and quiet, tiptoed around me, sensing the weight of what had been revealed. The embroidered tablecloth, that symbol of dignity, was folded and stored in a trunk, as if its presence might summon August's shadow. Sunday lunches ended, replaced by simple meals eaten in near silence. Papa quit his job at the co-op, refusing to work under August's influence, and returned to the fields, his hands once again calloused by manual labor. The town noticed. They broke with August, some said, speculating about money or pride. "Must have been a family spat," others whispered at church. Mama and Papa chose silence over explanation. "Some shames ain't ours to carry," Mama said, her voice firm with a wisdom I'd only later understand. The truth stayed within our walls, a wound we guarded from prying eyes. I changed too. The nightmares that had haunted me, August's hands, his whiskey breath, eased, though they never fully left. Sleep came easier, my sobs no longer muffled by a pillow. At school, my focus returned, the fog lifting as I traced letters and numbers in Mrs. Johnson's classroom. She watched me closely, her stern face softening. "You're back, Martha," she said one day, handing me a book of poetry. "Don't let go of that light." I clung to her words, a lifeline in a world that felt unsteady. But the town's gaze was heavier now. Neighbors' glances lingered, their whispers a low hum at the market or church. "Something's off with that girl," I overheard once, and my cheeks burned. I walked taller, Mama's advice echoing, "Hold your head high, daughter. You ain't the one who did wrong." Mama insisted on action, defying the era's customs. She took me to Dr. Parker in the next town, a gray-haired man with kind eyes. In his small office, the smell of antiseptic sharp, Mama explained what had happened, her voice low but unflinching. I stared at the floor, shame and relief warring within me. Dr. Parker's face grew grave. "You're not the first, Martha, nor the last," he said, his voice steady. "Silence is their greatest ally." He called August a criminal, a word that struck like a bell, freeing something in me. I wasn't a troubled girl or a family secret. I was a survivor of a crime, and the guilt wasn't mine. He checked my health, ensuring no lasting physical harm, and his gentle questions, about sleep, about fear, were the first time anyone asked how I felt. "You're strong," he said as we left. "Don't forget that." School became my sanctuary, the walk along the dirt road a ritual of reclaiming myself. Mrs. Johnson gave me extra tasks, grading papers, helping younger students, sensing I needed purpose. I taught Ellie to read better, her small victories a balm for my wounds. But home was harder. Papa's guilt hung like a fog, and my siblings' questions, unasked but in their eyes, made me feel exposed. Selena was my anchor. Now 13, she understood more than she should, her freckled face serious when she hugged me at night. "You saved me, Martha," she whispered once, and I held her tighter, the weight of her safety a triumph amid my pain. The town's rhythm continued, church, harvest, gossip, but our family stood apart. We stopped hosting kin, the absence of aunts and cousins a quiet relief. Mama started selling pies at the market, her hands kneading dough with a fierce determination to keep us afloat. I helped, stirring fillings, my own hand steadier now. One evening, as we worked by lamplight, Mama spoke softly. "Education's your way out, Martha. It's the one thing they can't take." Her words planted a seed, though I couldn't yet see its growth. I was still a girl finding her footing, learning to live with scars that ached but no longer bled. Faith crept in, not the loud kind from church, but a quiet trust in something bigger. I'd sit in the apple tree, its branches my cathedral, and pray, not to the Virgin this time, but to a God who saw me. "Help me be more than this pain," I'd whisper, the wind carrying my words. The cornfields answered, their rustling a hymn of endurance. At 78, I see that girl, her courage a fragile flame, flickering but unextinguished. The farmhouse, once a place of terror, became a crucible where I forged resilience. The tablecloth, hidden away, would one day return, not as a mask, but as a testament to survival. That spring, I began to believe I could be whole again, not despite my wounds, but because of the strength they'd taught me. The summer of 1965 shimmered with possibility, the Ohio hills alive with the hum of crickets and the scent of wild honeysuckle. I was 18, a young woman stepping out of the shadow of my past, my scars still tender but no longer defining me. Our farmhouse, its whitewashed walls weathered by time, stood firm against the winds of change, its dirt floor swept clean by Mama's unrelenting hands. The cornfields stretched beyond, their golden waves a reminder of both pain and refuge. At 78, my embroidery threads weave stories of those years, when I found a purpose that turned my wounds into a beacon for others, a light kindled in the ashes of my youth. Our town pulsed with its familiar rhythms, church bells, market days, and the gossip that clung like dust to the dirt roads. The Scioto River glittered under the sun, its banks a haven for children whose laughter I now envied less. Papa's return to fieldwork brought a leaner life, our table simpler without the co-op's steady pay. Mama's pies, sold at the Sunday market, kept us afloat, her hands tireless despite the lines etching her face. My siblings grew, Ellie now a chatterbox, Tom dreaming of the city, but I was different, quieter, my eyes holding a story no one fully knew. The embroidered tablecloth remained in its trunk, a relic of Sundays we'd buried, but its absence left space for something new to grow. School was my anchor, the one-room building a half-hour walk where Mrs. Johnson's voice cut through my lingering fog. My grades climbed, and I threw myself into teaching younger students, their small triumphs, scribbling their names, mastering sums, a mirror of my own rebuilding. Mrs. Johnson watched me, her sternness softening. "You've got a gift, Martha," she said, pressing a worn copy of Whitman's poems into my hands. "You reach them." Her words stirred something, a spark of purpose I hadn't named. But the town's whispers followed me, their eyes sharp at church or the market. "That Wilson girl's odd," they'd mutter, sensing my distance. I held Mama's advice close: "You ain't the one who did wrong." That summer, an opportunity arrived like a breeze through an open window. The town school needed an assistant teacher. Mrs. Johnson, nearing retirement, couldn't manage 40 children alone. Mama saw it before I did. "Why don't you try, Martha?" she said, her hands kneading dough. "You're already teaching half the neighborhood." I hesitated, my confidence fragile. At 18, I'd barely finished elementary school, and the town's gossip, rumors of my disrespect to August or worse, hung heavy. "What if they don't want me?" I asked, my voice small. Mama's eyes, fierce with love, met mine. "The one who should be ashamed is him, not you. Walk tall, daughter." Her words were armor, and I carried them to Mrs. Johnson's doorstep. To my surprise, she welcomed me with a hug, her arms thin but strong. "I've been waiting for you," she said, her voice low in the empty classroom. "You were my brightest, even when you faded." I knew something was wrong, but I never imagined. She trailed off, her eyes glistening. Then, in a whisper, she shared her own story, a childhood violation, a life shaped by mistrust. "That's why I never married," she said. "But you, Martha, you're stronger than I was." Her confession wove a thread between us, an invisible sisterhood of survivors. The next day, I began as her assistant, my salary small but a lifeline for our family. The classroom became my refuge, its chalk dust air cleaner than the farmhouse's memories. Teaching lit a fire in me. The children, with their smudged faces and eager hands, didn't know my past. To them, I was Teacher Martha, patient and firm, crafting songs for multiplication tables or reading stories under the oak outside. When a boy named Jimmy wrote his name for the first time, his grin was a salve on my wounds. I poured myself into them, staying late to help struggling readers, my own pain easing with each lesson. Mama noticed. "There's light in you again," she said one evening, her hands resting for once. I nodded, unable to explain how teaching felt like reclaiming the girl August had tried to erase. That fall, a federal program, VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America, came to our region, seeking teachers for adult literacy classes. Mrs. Johnson, her hands gnarled with age, recommended me. "It's your chance to grow, Martha," she said. "Don't let the past steal your future." At night, after school, I taught farmers and laborers, their calloused hands gripping pencils under oil lamps. Mr. John, a 58-year-old carpenter, was my favorite. "I want to read the Bible before I die," he said, his trembling fingers forming shaky letters. His determination mirrored mine, each word he learned a brick in my rebuilding. One evening, during a 4th of July celebration at school, Mr. John approached, a package in his hands. "For you, Teacher Martha," he said, offering a hand-carved wooden box, its surface etched with birds and flowers. "To keep your important things." My throat tightened. It was the first gift from a man since August's poisoned offerings, but this was different, pure, respectful. "Thank you," I whispered, tears brimming. The box became my talisman, holding my first paycheck and, later, a letter that would change my life. Faith grew quietly, not in church's pews but in the small acts of trust, Mrs. Johnson's belief, Mr. John's gift, Mama's fierce love. I'd sit in the apple tree, its branches my sanctuary, and pray to a God who felt closer now. "Show me how to use this pain," I'd whisper, the cornfields rustling in answer. At 78, I see that girl, her courage a quiet flame, turning trauma into purpose. The farmhouse, once a place of fear, became a forge for my calling. The tablecloth, still hidden, waited for a day when it would grace a table of healing, not horror. That summer, I began to believe I could build something beautiful from the broken pieces. The winter of 1969 was sharp and biting, the Ohio hills dusted with snow that crunched underfoot. I was 22, a woman finding her voice in a world bigger than the cornfields that had cradled my pain. Our farmhouse, its whitewashed walls softened by frost, stood as a quiet anchor, but my heart was pulling me elsewhere. The dirt floor, swept daily by Mama's hands, held the echoes of my past, yet it was also where I'd learned to stand tall. At 78, my embroidery stitches are slower, but they weave the story of that pivotal year, when a letter and a bus ride opened a path to transformation, stitching my wounds into a tapestry of purpose. Our town clung to its slow rhythms, church on Sundays, market chatter, the Scioto River frozen at its edges. Papa's fieldwork brought in less now, his shoulders stooped from years of labor, while Mama's pie sales kept our table full. My siblings were scattering, Tom in the city, Ellie dreaming of college, but I was rooted, teaching at the town school by day and adult literacy classes by night. The classroom was my sanctuary, its chalk dust era balm for the scars August had left. The children's laughter, their small hands clutching pencils, reminded me of the girl I'd been, and their trust fueled my resolve. But the town's whispers lingered, faint but persistent, marking me as that Wilson girl who'd caused trouble. Mama's words steadied me, "Walk tall, Martha. You're not the one who sinned." In late 1968, a letter arrived, its official seal a shock against our simple mailbox. The state education department invited me to a teacher training course in Columbus, all expenses paid, part of a federal push to improve rural schools. "You're going," Papa said, his voice firm despite my hesitation. "This is your chance." Mama nodded, her hands pausing over the dough. "Education's your freedom, honey." I was torn, leaving meant abandoning the classroom, my family, the fragile safety I'd built. But the spark Mrs. Johnson had seen, the fire Mr. John's carved box had kindled, urged me forward. In January 1969, I boarded a bus to Columbus, my first trip beyond our county. The cornfields faded behind me, their golden waves replaced by the gray sprawl of the city, its buildings towering like giants from a storybook. Columbus was a revelation. The training program housed us in an old convent, its stone walls echoing with the footsteps of rural teachers like me, young women with calloused hands and big dreams. The city hummed with noise, car horns, street vendors, the clatter of typewriters in the training center. I marveled at store windows, their displays of dresses and books a world apart from our market stalls. But it was the people who changed me most. There, I met Clara, a firebrand from Cincinnati with short hair and a laugh that turned heads. "You've got to read this, Martha," she said, slipping me a worn copy of Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Education's not just reading and writing, it's teaching people to question, to transform. Her words were a spark, igniting ideas I'd never dared think. Clara was a whirlwind, wearing pants and talking politics in a way that scandalized the older teachers. At night, in our dorm, we'd huddle over Freire's book, its pages dog-eared from her fervor. "Imagine schools where kids don't just memorize, but dream," she'd say, her eyes alight. "But be careful, folks don't like teachers who stir things up." Her warnings were real, we heard of educators fired for radical ideas. Yet her vision, of education as liberation, resonated with the girl who'd fought to protect Selena, who'd broken her silence to reclaim her life. I began to see my classroom not as a refuge, but as a forge for change, a place to empower others as I was empowering myself. The course was grueling, 6 months of pedagogy, psychology, and new teaching methods. I learned to craft lessons that sparked curiosity, to see students as thinkers, not just learners. But it was the evenings with Clara that shaped me most. We debated Freire's ideas, planned ways to bring them to our rural schools, and shared our stories. I told her about August, my voice steady for the first time, and she listened, her hand on mine. "You're a warrior, Martha," she said. "You turned pain into power." Her words, like Dr. Parker's years before, named my strength, weaving it into my identity. I wasn't just a survivor, I was a builder, a teacher with a mission. Returning home in July 1969, I was different. The bus ride back, through fields now green with summer, felt like crossing a threshold. Mama saw it as I stepped off. "There's light in your eyes, honey," she said, her smile tired but proud. I carried a teaching diploma, a state salary, and a vision inspired by Clara and Freire. At school, I transformed my classroom, introducing reading circles, hands-on science in the yard, and a mimeographed newsletter where students wrote their own stories. Parents grumbled at first, teachers doing too much, they said, wary of change, but when their children thrived, reading with confidence and asking questions, they relented. "My boy wants to be a doctor now," one mother said, her voice awed. I smiled, knowing the seeds I'd planted were taking root. Faith grew in those days, not in church's rigid pews, but in the quiet moments, praying in the apple tree, thanking a God who'd guided me to Columbus. The cornfields, once my hiding place, now felt like allies, their wrestling a course of endurance. At 78, I see that woman, her courage a steady flame, turning trauma into a calling. The farmhouse, its walls bearing my history, became a foundation for growth. The tablecloth, still in its trunk, waited for a day when it would grace a table of hope. That year, I began to believe my pain could light the way for others, that my voice, once silenced, could echo far beyond our small town. The autumn of 1971 painted the Ohio hills in fiery hues, the cornfields golden under a crisp blue sky. I was 24, a teacher whose classroom had become a crucible for change, my past a quiet fuel for my mission. Our farmhouse, its whitewashed walls softened by time, stood as a testament to endurance, its dirt floor still swept by Mama's weakening hands. The Scioto River wound through the valley, its steady flow a mirror to my resolve. At 78, my embroidery stitches falter, but they trace the story of those years, when I wove a network of hope, turning my pain into a shield for others. Our town hummed with its familiar cadence, church bells, harvest festivals, and gossip that swirled like leaves in the wind. Papa's fieldwork and Mama's pies kept us afloat, though her steps grew slower, her breath shorter. My siblings were carving their own paths, Tom in Columbus, Ellie at a secretarial school, but I was rooted, teaching children by day and adults by night. My classroom, alive with reading circles and student-written newsletters, was a rebellion against the rote learning of my youth. Parents, once skeptical, now praised their children's confidence. "My girl wants to be a nurse," one father said, pride in his eyes. But the town's whispers about that Wilson girl lingered, a faint sting I ignored, Mama's words my mantra, "Walk tall, Martha." My work with Vista's literacy program deepened my purpose. Teaching farmers and laborers to read under oil lamps, I saw their hunger for knowledge mirror my own. Mr. John, the carpenter, now read Psalms haltingly, his smile a gift. But it was beyond the classroom that my calling grew. Inspired by Clara, now a school director in Cincinnati, I began organizing discreet meetings for women at the school after hours. Billed as a sewing club, they were safe spaces to discuss health, rights, and, quietly, the pains we carried. Women came, mothers, widows, young wives, their faces taut with secrets. In the flicker of lamplight, they shared stories of abuse, violence, and silence, their voices trembling but growing stronger. "My husband hits me," one whispered, tears falling. I thought it was my fault. I listened, my own story a bridge to theirs, and we wove a network of support, each confession a stitch in our collective strength. These meetings were risky. Our town, steeped in conservatism, viewed such gatherings with suspicion. Women's lived nonsense, some men grumbled, and I heard murmurs of homewrecker when I helped a wife flee her abuser. But the women's courage, leaving violent homes, learning their rights, fueled me. Clara visited when she could, her bold ideas sparking ours. "You're building a revolution, Martha," she said, her eyes gleaming. "Keep it quiet, but keep it growing." Her copy of Freire's book, hidden in my carved wooden box, was my guide, its call to question and transform a fire in my chest. I wasn't just teaching, I was empowering, breaking the silence that had caged me and so many others. In 1972, Mama's health faltered, a vague exhaustion that worried me. At 52, she was too young to fade, but her hands trembled holding a spoon, her once tireless body demanding rest. "Just getting old, honey," she said, but I saw the truth in her sunken eyes. One Saturday, as we washed clothes in the tub, I proposed a bold idea. "Mama, what if we used the empty rooms for girls who need a safe place?" My older siblings were gone, the younger ones working in town, leaving our house too quiet. She paused, her hand still in the soapy water, then smiled faintly. Girls like you were? Your father'll grumble, but he'll come around. That night, Papa resisted, what'll folks think? But Mama's quiet resolve won him over. It's right, Henry, she said, and he nodded, his eyes on me. Our first girl was Lucy, 14, her arms bruised, her eyes hollow from her stepfather's abuse. I brought her home from school, where she'd lingered, afraid to return to her mother's complicity. Mama welcomed her, offering cornbread and a bed. Lucy was shy, flinching at sudden noises, but she helped in the kitchen, her small hands steadying as days passed. Soon came Abigail, 15, sold by her father to an older farmer, and Mary Jo, 16, pregnant by her uncle. Our house became a refuge, the barn adapted for more beds as girls arrived, each with a story that echoed mine. We had little, no funding, just my salary and Papa's pension, but we had love, and knowledge of the path to healing. It won't always hurt this much, I told them, watching their eyes flicker with hope. The town took notice. Teacher Martha's sheltering lost girls, some sneered, but others, mostly women, saw hope. Papa, softened by the girls' gratitude, built bunk beds and taught them to garden. Mama, despite her frailty, cooked and listened, her presence a balm. The girls carried deep wounds, nightmares, self-harm, but we guided them, sharing our own scars. You're not alone, I'd say, and they'd nod, their shoulders lifting. Faith grew in those moments, not in church's dogma, but in the quiet trust we built. I prayed in the apple tree, thanking a God who'd turned my pain into purpose. The cornfields, swaying beyond, sang of resilience. At 78, I see that woman, her courage a steady flame, weaving resistance from trauma. The farmhouse, once a place of horror, became a sanctuary, its walls holding new stories. The tablecloth, still in its trunk, waited for a day when it would grace a table of healing. That autumn, I realized my work was more than teaching, it was a rebellion against silence, a promise to protect and empower. Each girl we saved, each voice we freed, was a victory, a new thread in the fabric of a life I was only beginning to imagine. The spring of 1973 burst across the Ohio hills with a riot of wildflowers, their colors a quiet defiance against the gray of my memories. I was 26, a woman whose life had become a tapestry of healing, each thread woven from the pain of my youth. Our farmhouse, its whitewashed walls now patched with care, stood as a beacon, its rooms filled with girls whose stories echoed mine. The cornfields swayed beyond, their golden waves a hymn to resilience, while the Scioto River glimmered, its flow a mirror to our growing strength. At 78, my hands tremble as I embroider, but they trace the story of that year, when our refuge became official, and I learned that pain, once transformed, could bloom like daisies in the toughest soil. Our town pulsed with its steady rhythms, church bells, market days, the hum of gossip, but our house was different, a sanctuary amid the ordinary. Papa's fieldwork and my teaching salary sustained us, but Mama's fading health cast a shadow. Her hands, once tireless, now shook, her body slowing at 53. Yet she poured herself into the girls we sheltered, Lucy, Abigail, Mary Jo, and others, cooking, listening, offering the love she'd given me. My siblings, scattered or busy, left us to carry this work, but Papa, softened by the girls' courage, built beds and tended the garden with them. The town whispered, Martha's running a home for wayward girls, some with scorn, others with quiet awe. I held Mama's words close, walk tall, daughter. Our refuge, born from necessity, grew crowded. 7 girls lived with us, their nightmares and small triumphs filling the house. We had no formal support, just my earnings and donations of food or clothes from women in our sewing club. Those meetings, still disguised, were lifelines, where women shared stories of abuse and found strength to act. Clara, my friend from Columbus, visited when she could, her bold ideas fueling our work. You're saving lives, Martha, she said, her eyes fierce. Don't let anyone stop you. But the risks were real, conservative townsfolk grumbled, and powerful men, exposed by the girls we sheltered, sent veiled threats. Still, each girl who arrived, broken but breathing, was a reason to keep going. That spring, a crisis loomed. A social worker, Mrs. Ellis, arrived from the newly formed Department of Social Services, her clipboard and severe bun signaling trouble. "We've had complaints," she said, sitting at our kitchen table. "You're sheltering minors without legal authorization." My heart sank. Our work was irregular, driven by love, not paperwork. I explained, girls abused, abandoned, with nowhere else to go, but her face remained stern. For 3 days, she inspected our home, interviewed the girls, checked the pantry, and flipped through their schoolbooks. I lived in dread, fearing she'd shut us down. Lucy clung to me at night, whispering, "Will they send us back?" I held her, praying for a miracle. On the 3rd day, Mrs. Ellis called me aside. "What you're doing is irregular," she began, and my stomach dropped. "But it's necessary. I've seen girls like these end up in worse places without homes like yours." She removed her glasses, her eyes tired but kind. "I was one of them, Martha. No one saved me." Tears welled as she promised to help. "We'll make this official, a state-recognized home with funding and donations." I wept, relief flooding me. By December 1973, we received our certificate, Daisy Home Shelter Center for Girls in Vulnerable Situations. The girls chose the name, inspired by the resilient daisies dotting our yard, thriving despite hardship. With recognition came resources, a small monthly allowance, donated clothes, and a cook to ease Mama's burden. Selena, my cousin, returned from Chicago, her nursing degree in hand, to care for the girls' health. She suggested a new tradition, Sunday lunches in the yard, under the maple tree, to celebrate our strength. On the first Sunday of 1974, we spread the old embroidered tablecloth, not as a mask of perfection, but as a symbol of survival. Clara, Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Ellis, and women from our network joined us, their laughter mingling with the girls' chatter. "You've built something holy," Clara whispered, squeezing my hand. I looked at the table, girls eating, Mama smiling despite her frailty, and felt a peace I hadn't known. But challenges grew with our visibility. Local politicians tried to co-opt our work for votes, and men whose abuses we'd exposed grew bolder. One night, a fire sparked in the barn, arson, we suspected, though unproven. We contained it, but the threat lingered. Yet for every obstacle, support emerged. Women doctors offered free care, lawyers helped with custody, teachers gave lessons. Faith, not church-bound but lived, sustained me. In the apple tree, I prayed, thanking a God who'd turned my scars into a shelter. The cornfields, rustling softly, echoed my gratitude. Mama's health worsened, her body a shadow of its strength. One evening, as we sat on the porch, she took my hand. "Keep this going, Martha, until no girl needs to run." Her words were a vow I carried. At 78, I see that woman, her courage a radiant flame, building a home from trauma's ashes. The farmhouse, once a place of horror, was now a haven, its walls alive with hope. The tablecloth, reclaimed, bore witness to our resilience. That spring, I realized my life's work was to transform silence into voices, pain into possibility, one girl at a time. The summer of 1975 bloomed with a quiet triumph, the Ohio hills ablaze with wildflowers and the hum of life. I was 28, a woman whose scars had become the foundation of a legacy, our farmhouse a sanctuary for girls who, like me, had known darkness. The whitewashed walls, now expanded with new rooms, glowed under the sun, while the cornfields swayed, their golden waves a chorus of endurance. The Scioto River sparkled, its flow a testament to the resilience we'd built. At 78, my hands weave embroidery with care, each stitch a memory of that year, when Daisy Home became a beacon, and I learned that pain, transformed, could light the way for thousands. Our town pulsed with its familiar cadence, church bells, harvest chatter, gossip swirling like dust, but Daisy Home stood apart, a refuge known beyond our valley. Papa, now gray and slower, tended the garden with the girls, his gruff voice softened by their laughter. Mama's absence, after her passing in 1976, was a wound, her final wish, "Keep it going, Martha, my guiding star." My siblings, scattered across cities, sent letters of pride, but this work was mine and Selena's, her nursing skills a steady hand in our mission. The girls, now a dozen, their ages 12 to 17, filled the house with hope and healing, their nightmares easing as they learned to dream. Daisy Home was no longer just a house. Official recognition brought resources, state funding, donations, volunteer teachers, but also scrutiny. A 1975 New York Magazine article, "The House Where Girls Find Their Voice," spread our story, drawing journalists, supporters, and threats. Politicians tried to claim our work for votes, while men exposed by the girls we sheltered grew hostile. An arson attempt in 1976, though contained, left scorch marks on the barn and fear in our hearts. Yet support outweighed the danger. Women doctors offered free clinics, lawyers fought for the girls' rights, and Clara, now a Cincinnati principal, sent books and encouragement. "You're changing the world, Martha," she wrote, her words a spark in my weary moments. Our Sunday lunches, spread under the maple tree, were a ritual of joy. The old embroidered tablecloth, framed at the entrance as a symbol of survival, was replaced by ones sewn by the girls, their bright patterns a testament to new beginnings. Women from our network, Mrs. Ellis, now a friend, and others who'd shared their stories, joined us, their voices mingling with the girls' laughter. "This is what healing looks like," Selena said one Sunday, her eyes on a girl who'd just read her poem aloud, her voice steady for the first time. I nodded, my heart full, seeing Mama smile in the faces around me. In 1977, we opened Betty Library, named for Mama, on a donated lot. Its shelves, filled with books from across the state, were a haven for the girls and the town. "Education's freedom," I told them, echoing Mama, as they devoured novels and science texts. The library hosted our sewing club, now openly a women's group, where stories of abuse gave way to plans for new lives. "You gave me courage," a mother named Teresa said, her children safe after leaving her abuser. Each victory, girls graduating, women rebuilding, was a stitch in the fabric of our work, proof that silence, once broken, could never bind again. Challenges persisted. Conservative backlash labeled us troublemakers, and funding battles tested our resolve. But the girls' transformations, Lucy studying nursing, Abigail teaching at a local school, were my strength. Faith, not in church's pews but in our shared purpose, sustained me. In the apple tree, my old refuge, I prayed, thanking a God who'd turned my pain into a movement. The cornfields, rustling softly, sang of hope, their golden sea a promise of endurance. Today, at 78, I live in the expanded Daisy Home, its walls echoing with over 2,000 girls' stories. Some became doctors, teachers, mothers, others work here, perpetuating our cycle of healing. Our Sunday lunches stretch across the yard, the tablecloths vibrant with the girls' designs. An embroidered sign, made by a girl named Sarah, hangs at the entrance, where one voice rises, 1,000 find courage. It's my life's truth. The girl who hid in cornfields, who broke her silence at 17, didn't just survive, she built a legacy. The tablecloth, once a shroud, now frames our origin, a reminder that horror can become hope. Looking back, I see the Sundays that broke me and the ones that remade me. I didn't choose my pain, but I chose what to do with it, transforming a house of fear into a home of possibility. Your story doesn't end in the dark, I tell the girls, watching their eyes light with belief. Their voices, once whispers, now ring clear, and I know every tear, every fight, was worth it. The silence is broken, and in its place, we've woven a chorus of hope, echoing far beyond our small Ohio town, carried by every girl who finds her strength at our table.